Good morning. Welcome to the branch. I am glad you're with us today. Thank you for being a part of this kind of new experiment for us. And we're excited about what's happened so far and just really looking forward to what's going to continue to build with the branch and with what we're doing upstairs. So thank you for being a part of this. I hope you noticed that we got a little more light on me today. We're learning every week as we do these videos how to make them a little more presentable and do the best we can to give you good content and a good presentable package. So we got a little more light on me today, and there might be a bad part of that too. So if it's too much light on me today, tell us and we'll work on that. And I am really grateful for the one who we will not name, who does all these videos with me and edits them and does all the work that's required in order for us to be able to do the branch on the video side. So grateful for all of the people who are helping to make this possible. We have been in a Fearless series, and as you would guess, you can't talk about fearless in the Bible without talking about Joshua, and particularly Joshua chapter 1. So that's what we're going to focus on today. But I want to encourage you to do something that we asked our teenagers to do at summer camp when we were on this passage. We asked them to do a few things with this passage. We wanted them to read it through slowly. Just take their time and read the passage through slowly. And we wanted them, the first time they read it through slowly, to pay attention to what word or phrase was jumping out at them. That's also something I kind of do when I'm preparing sermons. As I read through a passage, what's jumping out at me? What's speaking to me? Because that might have relevance to someone else. So I want to encourage you this week to read through this passage slowly and think about what word, what phrase is jumping out at you. And then the second time we asked them to read it through slowly, we said, pay attention to where the story is connecting to your life. And so I would encourage you to do that this week as well. And then the third time we asked them to read through it slowly, pay attention to what God might be inviting you to. See, one of the real challenges of reading the Bible is sometimes we're reading to get through. And we need to make sure we're reading to hear God's voice. And sometimes that means slowing down and paying attention to different parts as we're reading. So I would encourage you to do that this week and jot some notes down, and maybe you all can talk about that next week at the branch. Hear these words from Joshua chapter 1. After the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord said to Joshua, son of Nun, Moses' aide, Moses, my servant, is dead. Now then, you and all these people, get ready to cross the Jordan River into the land I'm about to give them to the Israelites. I will give you every place where you set your foot, as I promised Moses. And your territory will extend from the desert to Lebanon and from the great river, the Euphrates, all the Hittite country to the Mediterranean Sea in the west. No one will be able to stand against you all the days of your life. As I was with Moses, so I will be with you. I will never leave you or forsake you. Be strong and courageous, because you will lead these people to inherit the land I swore to their ancestors to give them. Be strong and very courageous. Be careful to obey all the law my servant Moses gave you. Do not turn from it to the right or to the left, that you may be successful wherever you go. Keep this book of the law always on your lips. Meditate on it day and night, so that you may be careful to do everything written in it. Then you will be prosperous and successful. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged. For the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. In this passage, a new generation is standing on the banks of the Jordan River, wondering if they will be the generation that has the faith to do what their wandering parents could never do. That's a good question in our day of American Christianity, but that's not my sermon today. But we get to see a new phrase here in this story of the Israelites moving into the promised land. It's that phrase, go over, cross over. This group of some 2 million people is finally poised to claim the promise that God had made to them. But they're also probably scared to death that they will commit the same sins their parents did and the people who died in the wilderness because of their disobedience. And so they're in this tough spot because Moses, the only leader they have ever known, is dead. And now Joshua's in a place of leadership. And they're on the verge of victory. The only thing keeping them from the promises of God is the Jordan River. That's the only thing between them and a land that is flowing with milk and honey. And they're not proud of their past. They see the problems of their past, but they're also frightened about their future. Can you relate to that? Not real proud of my past, not real sure of where I came from, but kind of real frightened about the future. And too many of us, I think, often are afraid of turning out like a family member or a friend that we don't think did real well in life. And because of that, we're kind of just wandering in the wilderness, experiencing more failure than faithfulness. Now, the Jordan River was pretty easy to cross on most days during most times, but during flood season, it was treacherous. In some sections, it could be as wide as 2 miles across, the river swelling up. And it's important to note here that God calls his people to cross the Jordan when it is precisely at its most dangerous point and when it seems most impossible. And the Jordan also was a boundary between what the Israelites presently had and what God was promising on the other side. What's your Jordan River today? I'm not going to ask you all to talk about that at the end, but I want to get that in your mind. What's your Jordan River today? What barriers are you facing? Where is God asking you to take a step of faith? Here's what happens in many of our lives if we're not careful. We keep going up to the Jordan River of our lives, some decision we need to make, something that needs to happen in our lives, some change that needs to happen in our lives. We keep going right up to the Jordan River, but we never cross over. We go up, but we don't cross over. And if you know this journey, it takes a lot to get you back up to the banks of the Jordan River, and you muster up a lot of courage just to get to the banks of that decision. And then you hesitate, and you won't cross over. And what I have found as a pastor for 27 years is many of our lives are defined by going up, but not crossing over. And that's where we need to hear the command of God today. Be strong and courageous. And maybe the promise too, because I will be with you. And let's understand there's an expectation for us in this passage. It's not just God's going to take care of it. God has some things that we've got to do. We've got to be strong. We have to do our part. Life is a two-way street. God does his part, but we do our part. So let's stop this silliness of, I just leave it to God. I just do the best I can. God's going to take care of it. And then we spend the rest of our lives wondering why God doesn't do anything with our lives. We have to do our part. God is not telling Joshua and the children of Israel, just hang out on the banks of the river, maybe play some cornhole, get the grill going, and when I'm ready, I'll just bring you across. They had spent 40 years in the wilderness because they wouldn't do their part. Friends, we all have a role in the fulfillment of God's purpose for our lives, for our family, for our community, and for this world. God says to the people through Joshua, don't you be passive. You've got to be strong. You have a part to play. And then we need to be obedient. God's work is not going to happen through disobedience. I think that's the simplest thing I could ever say, and I think it's the most profound thing I can say. God's work does not happen through disobedience. From time to time, this has probably happened to you. There's some conversations going on. This happens a lot in my world. And somebody will say, Dan, I just don't know how my life ended up like this. And I want to be sensitive and caring because it's such a privilege to have people open up their lives to me. And I want to help them. But, in many cases, I have to say it's obvious how life ended up this way. We made choices that didn't reflect God's will for our lives, and there are consequences to those choices. And so it's kind of obvious why life is the way it is. And God says, Joshua and the people, you've got to obey. You got to obey all the law my servant Moses gave you. You've got to obey it in such a way that you just stay on a straight path. You don't turn to the right or to the left. You stay with it. And if you'll follow like that, you'll have success wherever you go. And then he also says something more. He says, don't let this law depart from your mouth. It was to be spoken often. People around you got to know that you're following the law of God. It just can't be something internal. Kind of goes along with what the psalmist says in the first psalm. The psalmist says, not only do we need to hear the law, but we have to live the law. Have you met any people, and don't call out names right now, have you met people that can tell you the law of God to every minute point? They can talk to you about it, but they can't seem to show you the life of God. You see, I think that's the critique the culture in America has of Christianity in America. They critique us and they say, you people seem to talk a lot about the law of God or knowledge of God, but you don't ever seem to show me the life of God. And God's saying to Joshua, not only do you need to know the law, but you got to know the law so you can live the law among your people. And then in verse 9, he says, don't be terrified or discouraged. And you kind of get this picture that this is kind of the stoic, stick with it, kind of head moving forward, and don't let anybody see you sweat kind of thing, and just plow through life, do the best you can. But he's not asking Joshua for a stoic response. Joshua is to live this way because the Lord, his God, was going to be with him wherever he went. You don't live stoically in response to that. You live joyfully in response to that. Life looks different when you know you have God with you wherever you go. You live abundantly when you know that and live like that. Have there been times when you or others in your life, didn't recognize that God had provided everything you already need to meet the challenge? Can you kind of think back into your life and say, man, there was something I was really nervous about, I was anxious about, I didn't think I was ever going to break through. And then when I got to the other side, I realized, oh, God had everything I needed for the challenge at just the right time. You see, God had already given the land to Joshua and the people. This wasn't hey, there's something you might want to check out, and if it works out, you can have it. This was, I have given you this land. Now I want you to go walk in obedience and faith and in courage to me and to this promise. Your role is to be strong. We're to be strong and courageous because God is with us. So a couple of things for you to discuss around your tables and this week. And, you can kind of go wherever you want to with this. But the question maybe around the tables today is where is God asking you to take a step of faith? And can I encourage you to give some grace to yourselves right now? Because you're up in something we're calling the branch, and we don't really know what we're doing or what we're going to see God do through this. But you took a step of courage just to do what you're doing today. So I want to say, first things first, good job on that. Way to walk in the direction of God. But where else might God be asking you to take a step of faith? And then I want you to kind of just spend some time with this week. I mentioned earlier, read through this passage slowly a few times this week and see what God says to you about this passage. But one other thing in response to that, I'd like you to complete this sentence. And I put this sentence on your branch weekly so you can take it home with you. But I want you to kind of complete the sentence, a little fill in the blank. God, help me to be brave and strong for, and then put somebody's name in there, put a situation in there, and then because, and fill out the rest. Who does God need you to be strong and courageous for this week? One of the things we really wanted the teenagers to focus on this day at camp was to kind of get outside themselves. Who around you do you need to be strong and courageous for so they can know the promises of God? Spend some time on that this week, and if it works, then maybe next week you all can talk about that. Again, I'd love to hear what God's doing in your life, what you see God doing in the branch, and where you see we might still need to be strong and courageous in new places, in new times, to gather people for faith conversations. Thanks for being here today. I hope your fellowship and conversation is rich this morning.